So today we're going to talk about construction management, and we're going to delve into some of the issues faced in the construction industry. I'm joined today by Steve Higgins, Construction Director of Ascia, which is a regional contractor working within the south east of England. Or south of England.
South of England.
Yeah, south of England. So Steve, tell us a little bit about yourself and Ascia Construction.
As you say, I mean, I've been in the industry now, coming 25 years. Worked for a few different contractors from over my time of various different sizes and scales. I've ended up at Ascia Construction, which is, as you say, is a privately owned regional contractor. So we cover the south coast from sort of Bournemouth Pool across to Worthing, outside the M25 up to sort of Newbury. So that's quite a large patch. We typically projects sub 10 million, sort of sweet spot 3 to 5. Within that, education, commercial, retail, some private sector housing, local authority housing. We don't do volume housing. There are not lots of people out there that are much better at that than us, to be brutally honest. So we're a good sort of well kept secret really on the south coast, and I really like the business.
Fantastic, Steve. One thing people like to know, and I would like to know, is how did you get into construction? What was that sort of moment of which you sort of found yourself working in this rather challenging industry?
Yeah, so I mean, things are a little bit different now with schools and school leavers, but looking back to my last year of school, and I'm talking secondary school, we had a careers advisor was almost sort of resident 2 or 3 days a week. And I'd always had an interest in the industry from something that happened with a job that my parents were having done at home. And I just mentioned that kind of flippantly, to the careers advisor. And there was a scheme on offer at the time called New Horizons, which sort of went out and sort of looked for apprenticeships for you, rather than these days where businesses are quite forthcoming in offering apprenticeships. So I managed to get myself a couple of offers, which I went for interviews for, which, having interviewed school leavers, is very difficult to put yourself across because, you haven't got the most to offer at that age, other than yourself and your sort of work ethic. So, New Horizons managed to find me an apprenticeship. I joined Hall and Tawes, as it was at the time, which then became Mansell and, has developed into what it is today. And I finished school on the Friday and started my apprenticeship on the Monday. While all my friends were off enjoying their summer holidays, I went straight into the workplace, into the unknown, really. But likewise straight into earning and learning. I wouldn't change that for the world, really.
Well, it's a great example of how to get into the industry and the opportunities the industry obviously provides.
Yeah.
So you're recently construction director, previously a construction manager. So what do construction managers do, and what do they do, say, in Ascia, Hall and Tawes, and contractors?
So it very much varies depending on the business and the size of the business and the scale of the projects that they do. So from my experience, we've got, so sticking with Ascia as the most recent example, so we've got a team of contracts managers which have sort of 2 or 3 jobs under their wing, and therefore 2 or 3 site teams that are reporting to them. So it's really just a channel, someone to channel that information through to feed back into the wider business, so that we can make the right business decisions necessarily, depending on what the environment is, for example. Relationships with clients. So, a big part of the job is bringing in new work. It's not just about dealing with the work that's in front of you. We also need a constant churn of tenders coming in. So a lot of that is relationship based. That's the part of the job I like particularly is that the relationships with clients and trying to get repeat business. A big part of what we do is repeat business. And you're only as good as your last job. So again, another part of the job is making sure we finish projects. Your lasting memory is how you finish a job.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do, if you've got a year-long project, you can do quite a lot of damage in that last month if you're not finishing the job off properly. So some of that is keeping the site teams honest. I mean, we've got a brilliant bunch of site staff, contracts managers, but you always need that other pair of eyes on the jobs because everybody sees things differently. And if you're that sort of tier removed from the front, the pointy end, if you like, you'll always see things slightly differently. And you almost want to be, objective in your view to test the waters, to get the right answers, to ultimately deliver the right end product. So it's just that tier of above the pointy end of what's going on, to make sure that we're delivering the right jobs, as well as keeping the next one coming in, so that team can move straight on elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. That's a really good overview. So you mentioned obviously about how you came in and the New Horizons, the apprenticeships, and what have you. So how does one progress into a construction manager's role? And are there any sort of qualifications or training competencies one needs?
There are lots of different. My route, I progressed up the scale really. So I went trainee site manager, project manager, contracts manager. So I've followed what is a fairly logical route in the industry. My education wise, when I first went into Hall and Tools, so I did the ONC, HNC route. I'm sure there's a more modern name for those qualifications these days. Throughout your career, you're bound to pick up bits of training that are logical for your role at the time. Onto sort of chartered memberships. I didn't go down the chartered membership personally, but I'm a big advocate of it.
Yep.
And it's an element of laziness, I suppose. I could do it. I just never got around to it. There's always something else going on. But it is a big thing. As for youngsters coming into the industry, I would massively advocate them doing the chartered memberships.
Yep.
So MCIOB, or if you're commercial or operational. But yeah, I did a post this week on I'm just generally interested in pieces of training or development that people have done that's really stuck with them. It's quite interesting. It was a mix, as you can imagine, from people's different roles. But I've had a couple of things in my career that have stuck with me, that I still use to this day. That at the time you probably don't realise, but. I think I answered that question.
Yeah, you have. You have. And something you touched, just a bit of clarification. I did the HNC route. It's a great route. And for those who don't know, when I did it, I'm assuming the same with you, it's part-time. So you may have a day release. So you're always working, you're getting the on-site or on-site if it is on-site, but you're getting the work-based experience as well as the education, which might suit some people better than full-time education, right?
I think it's massively valuable. Casting back to my time of that day, the day release, you were there also with the full-timers.
Yeah.
And the difficulty with doing the full-time route is, of course, you've nothing to relate it to. So I wouldn't change the route that I went for the world for that reason. You can do it the other way, of course, but you are sort of textbook. Your reliance on textbooks is massive versus real-time experience. And if you go down the site route, sticking with my experience, I'm surrounded by people that I can ask questions of. And I was a big part of my development really was always asking questions. I've worked with some fantastic people over the years that have forgotten more than I'll ever know. So yeah, it is the day release side of things is invaluable, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely horses for courses. How you learn, and the environment in which you sort of learn better in.
Yeah.
But I'm very similar to you. I learn better by doing.
Yeah,
I completely can relate to what you say. When you're in the classroom with the full timers, you have a huge advantage over them.
Yeah.
And there's no two ways about it. But there's the point being is there's two routes, isn't there?
Of course. And everybody's different.
Absolutely.
There's practical learners and there's textbook learners.
Yeah.
And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just whatever best suits you.
But there's two routes, and that's the great thing.
Yeah.
When just before, obviously, we came in here to do this video, you mentioned to me, and this is something you won't be prepared for, but you mentioned to me you're really enjoying life at the moment at Ascia. What makes them different to maybe some of your previous employers, or if you don't want to answer that, what's resulting in you really enjoying your job at the moment?
So we're a smaller business, and therefore a smaller team. Which just by definition, really, we're a quite close-knit team. I just feel I like the environment, the working environment that we've got, where I think everybody knows everything about everything that's going on. Everybody's willing to help each other out. Everybody's busy, but there's no in a smaller business you can't hide, I suppose, for want of a better description. But we're just a really good, close knit working group. We're not a contractual animal, and not every project leads down that route. Yeah. But I have worked at businesses in the past where that very much is the approach, and it's not. At the time, that's how you're made to work. That's how the business operates. So being so far removed from that, where every building project has a contract to work under. I think it's if you view it as a last resort rather than a opening gambit of when things don't quite go to plan, which the nature of what we do, that is every day can bring a different challenge. So it's a much more friendly, approachable business. That's the environment we try to create. Certainly, it's how I like to work. It shouldn't be a breath of fresh air, but it kind of is to some degree. And that is the feedback that we get from outside. That's probably a big part of why such a high percentage of our work is repeat business.
So that sounds really good then, Steve. So it sounds very much like a sort of team environment. So let's get on to some more challenging things. Obviously, in our industry, we see a lot of building contracts going into administration. In your opinion, why does that happen, and why so many?
Construction is a low margin industry anyway. Quite often when you chat to people that are in different industries, and you get to talking about margins, and they almost chuckle at the construction industry and the margins that people do work to, almost in disbelief. So that is a big part of it, that we're just not in an industry where it's not lending itself to making huge profits, despite what people may think. Payment terms is another thing. There's some crazy payment terms around at the moment where it's kind of a ripple effect. So if a main contractor has longer payment terms, and then the subcontractors that are working for them are signed up to those payment terms, so people are always waiting for their money. It only takes something small to hold up that payment process, or to interfere with that payment process, something that could go wrong, and the ripple effect can be huge. Not every project that happens goes swimmingly and goes according to plan. In a low margin industry, one project could go wrong, and before you know it, you're in trouble. In some cases, some contractors could end up with, depending on what your turnover of projects is, or any projects running at any one time, you could have 2 or 3 that have gone wrong for any number of reasons, because there's all sorts of external factors that affect the construction industry, particularly in the last couple of years. And before you know it, you're in trouble. It's always a kind of a fine line, which is why cash flow and cash in the business is so important.
And given your experience within the industry, more recently in the capacity, obviously, of a construction manager, and now as a construction director, having obviously greater responsibilities and probably a better overview of the external influences of which you've mentioned, how can companies, the industry, how can we kind of prevent so many organisations going into an administration? What can we do better?
Oh, as an industry, yeah. I suppose, when things go wrong on a project, like I said earlier, you're bound by a contract. So the client and the contractor are bound by a contract. I think when a problem is known, the earlier you can bring that problem to the table, and it works both ways. The contractor could have a problem, the client could have a problem. If you're truly working collaboratively in a collaborative environment, it works both ways. There's good times and there's bad times. If you bring the problems to the table at the earliest opportunity and try and talk around them rather than trying to solve the problem, which could take, I don't know, however many months, and then ultimately it can't be solved. It can help try and solve disputes before they become disputes, and therefore, financially, I mean, it's all going to end up in a commercial position. If you can try and solve those problems early, that could make a big difference. I don't know, I'm struggling. I can't remember what we discussed earlier.
That's okay. But what about the organisations themselves then? So I asked the question around, how can the industry, so you're talking about client, contractor, relationships and contracts and open dialogue and transparency. But what about, thinking about Ascia, you mentioned, I know not in this video, but you mentioned earlier, we try to avoid the race to the bottom.
Yeah.
So that really, in some respects, is a way of protecting your interests and avoiding unnecessary contractual relationships, or you're already preventing that issue of commercial costs, cash, whatever.
Yeah.
So what about as a business? How can a business protect themselves from administration in this environment?
That is a good point. Yeah. So I mean, there is not all the time, but there is. I mean, generally, this is a results business, so it works from a client team. When a client employs a consultant team to get them the best value for money, because that's what it's about. Sometimes, just sticking with that, sometimes the offer that's put forward, it's the same in domestic life, the cheapest offer doesn't necessarily make it the best offer. So you kind of have to, when we price work, you've just got to be happy with that price that you've submitted. I think with client teams, if your end goal is simply to get the cheapest price, which the race to the bottom effectively, and just trying to engineer and trying to coax contractors to become that cheapest price, and not necessarily focusing on the value that's offered and the substance behind that price. So we tend to just focus on putting an offer together that we're 100% happy with, that we think we've covered all the bases. And if you are, trying to, if that is your price, so our submitted price is the price that we're happy with. If it then comes back and you're like, well, can you reduce? You've really got to be robust with that. And look, that is the price that we can deliver that project for. I think as an industry, if there was more focus on the value of an offering and the substance behind a quote, rather than just getting to that cheapest price. There's obviously an onus on, with D&B jobs in particular, but the onus is for the contractor to take as much risk. The client's looking to offset as much risk as they possibly can to take, for the contractor to take all that risk. That comes at, as a contractor, then you've got an exercise to do of, well, what's it going to add to the project for us to take that risk? So you then have to do your due diligence into trying to de-risk as much as possible to make your price as scientific as it possibly can be. That information required to do that, for us to take that risk, is not always there. So de-risk. In order to de-risk for a client, the more information you can do to put a tender pack together, the better and the more accurate, and therefore the more chance of successful delivery you're going to get throughout from a contractor.
And I guess you probably do that same process before even accepting to tender, right? So you may, God forbid, I suggest there's some unscrupulous clients out there as well. But I guess maybe something comes in, you go, this client isn't right for us, we're not the right fit, our value proposition doesn't work in this instance. So I guess there's also, maybe being selective of the tenders you go for as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And that it can be as simple as that you may not have pre-existing relationships with that consultant team, so they're not known entities. Well, it's both ways, of course. But yeah, you have to be selective for your own sort of longevity as much as anything else. I mean, you could. The industry at the moment is very buoyant, particularly in our sort of slice of it, if you like, the sort of sub 10 million. You have to be fairly robust in what you can physically churn out as a business. So, we could quite easily double our turnover, as an example. But realistically, to do that, you would have to grow to be able to deliver that, more staff. But is that necessarily the right thing to do, for us? So you have to be selective. So fortunately at the moment, like I say, the market's buoyant. So you're having to switch off good projects in favour of very good projects. But you have to be, if you're not confident that you could deliver that project in the right way, even at tender stage, delivering the proper, well thought out tender to return, then you have to be confident with yourself to switch it off and say, look, please consider us for the next one. But at the moment, we're just it's too risky for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think given our capacity as PMQSs that put together these tenders and send them out and do the reviews, I think anybody who's reasonable would rather hear the fact that you can't deliver what the client wants. Either the timescales, the cost, the quality, the resourcing, whatever it might be. I don't think too many reasonable consultants out there would then switch you off for the next opportunity.
No.
But I know, having worked for contractors, sometimes that's the mindset. If we say no, we won't get the next one. But actually, open and honesty at the front end is actually well received. Certainly in our case.
We expect the same from our supply chain.
Yeah.
It's a well-known adage in the industry of how do you turn a good subcontractor into a bad one? You just give them loads and loads of work. And if they don't say no, then you overstretch them and so on. So we expect the same from our supply chain, really, just to say, look, we can't take any more on at the moment. Thank you very much. You're doing no damage by doing that, and it's exactly the same for us.
And using that adage and sort of just going a bit further in the conversation here, I guess also you, as well as clients and us, have a responsibility not to overload people as well, to recognise that actually these guys are busy, they're doing lots of work for us. Actually, we might contribute to their downfall as well. So there's also that to add into the mix, right?
Absolutely. Well, as we want to be around for a long, long time, we want our subcontractors to be around for a long, long time. And you don't want to be part of engineering somebody's downfall by just, because there are, it's difficult to say no.
Yeah.
And we recognise that. So sometimes, we do think about how we give our work out, and I'm sure client teams do the same. It's no different, up the line. So,
absolutely.
But yeah, it is important to be selective particularly when the market is good.
Yeah.
Because you can, take on too much and become overstretched. Yeah,
absolutely. So let's move on to another sort of recognised challenge. So we see, obviously, in our industry a lot of projects that overrun, get delayed. From a construction management point of view, why does this happen? And when you sort of answered that, what are then the measures that we can put in place to sort of eliminate or reduce or completely eradicate some of these delays?
Yeah, I mean, construction is, I'd say, fairly unique, but I mean, it probably affects other industries in the same way. But we're affected by so many external factors. As we've seen over the last couple of years, government decisions or Brexit, that a lot of our materials come from European countries, or just abroad in general. Likewise with the labour, we're weather, any number of things can affect a construction project. When we take it on from the outset, we obviously put our best laid plan in place, and there's science behind that. So there are weighted percentages for working at different periods of the year based on our climate, and so we can plan to the nth degree, and we do that. So there is a science to our program when we submit for tender, and subsequently when we're awarded a project, and we then apply more and more science to the program. But it's you can have the best plan in the world, but every day you can face a new challenge. So the emphasis on having a good front end team that can react to those issues, but have always got that best laid plan in place. So we break our programs down into monthly, fortnightly, to give you that sort of reaction time, if you like, if something doesn't quite go to plan. We're never going to be in control of the weather, but we have to think about if we've got a project that is heavily masonry biased, and it seems to happen quite often, but you're starting on site in October and your entire masonry period runs from November to March. That will or should reflect in the program that we offer. Clients, there is always a constant pressure. It's not just about getting the best value for money. It's also about delivering the quickest. They want their product as quickly as possible. I think, that's where the consultant team is. If you've got 3 tender returns, one's got a program of 40 weeks, one's 45 weeks, one's 50 weeks. Which one's correct? And that's where you've got to be happy with what you submit. The client team has to look at those offerings and be happy that perhaps the 40 weeks is just not achievable. 50 weeks, so you're pitching at 45 weeks is the right way to go. We're a collaborative business. I'd like to think you can always be better, but we meet our supply. I mean, we're nothing without our supply chain. Every project has its key supply chain members. They're key to the critical path of the program. If you meet them on the regular, the same as we spoke earlier on about when a problem comes up, bringing that to the table. If our supply chain fail, we fail. So the earlier we can know about any issues that might affect program, the sooner we can start planning around it. So there's lots of little things that you can do to try and maintain program and prevent that overrun at the end. And it's a construction program isn't a fixed entity; it's a constant, ever-changing entity. And I think that's important to recognise. That you're not just following a line on a draw, on a Gantt chart. You're ever changing it to suit and trying to hit that end date.
Okay, thanks. I mean, there's lots of useful insights there. So thanks, for that, Steve. So let's move on to another topic. We talked a lot about sort of deliverability, resource, the things that you need to when you're sort of going to take on a project and commit. Do we, as an industry at the moment, do we have the right skill set and the right volume of resource to deliver the sort of volume and complexity of today's projects?
I mean, there has been a skills gap. There's no two ways about it. I mean, sticking with the sort of the sharp, pointy end. I mean, Brexit had a big impact with, we had a lot of highly skilled foreign labour that almost vanished seemingly overnight. That is going to take time to repair. If you stick with, our the industry, I mean, don't get me wrong, massive inroads have been made. There was a time when I don't think the routes into the industry were pushed, or could have been pushed a lot harder. There was almost a perception some years ago that the construction industry was where people would end up. If all else failed, there's the construction industry. We're so far removed from the truth, as you know. I think that there's been a big shift towards encouraging young people into the industry, but there was a time when that wasn't happening, and that's where we've got this gap, and that's kind of why the people that are on the right hand side of the gap, if you like, are so valuable, because good people are hard to find. And are there enough of them? Probably not. The truth, in my opinion, there aren't. But there are now some really good people coming through at the beginnings of their career, if you like. But to me, there's been a big gap in the middle.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, sticking to the sort of theme, do we have the right employment sort of conditions or operational conditions to really encourage people into our industry? Have we got that right, or is there some room for improvement?
I think there's always room for improvement. I think it's got a lot. It's not got a lot, but it's got tons better. I mean, the things that we have. Again, I'll start with the pointy end. So the guys and girls that are on site. If you went back, let's say 10 years, there was nothing available for mental health. I mean, mental health probably wasn't even considered back then. But you've got fantastic organisations out there now that are really pushing that. I mean, suicides in construction, we all know what the fairly damning numbers are. There are great organisations out there now that are making inroads into that. If you go to sites now, we spend more time at work than we do at home. So the office environments that we provide on sites are worlds ahead. I mean, I'm thinking back years ago when you had a candle. I'm talking back in my dad's era, where a candle, and that was your light and your heating in the office. Compared to what we've got now, where you've got physical offices away from the office, to give people that working environment. There is room for improvement, 100%. But I think there's been a big recognition of building sites are not dirty, horrible, cold, dank. We do work long hours. It's a long hours industry. People are working out in the cold. It is all we do is work to deadlines. The standing joke that years just disappear in the construction industry, because we're just always working to the next deadline, which might be a week away, 2 weeks away, and before you know it, a year's disappeared. It's a tough environment, and the figures probably reflect that. But yeah, I mean, there's been huge steps forward, but there's certainly more that can be done. I've recently done my mental health first aid training. We'll be bringing others to do the same, to try and give as much of an offering on our sites. If you think about defibrillators, on sites, there's lots of things that have happened in the last 5-10 years that are all moving in the right direction, but a long way to go.
Yeah, no, you've mentioned some really good points there, and I recognise those, and that it is far better than it was. and there's still some way to go. In your opinion, you think about sort of maybe youngsters watch these videos, or maybe somebody wants to get into the industry, or someone who's in the industry sort of looking to push on. How can we make it more attractive for people wanting to come into the industry?
I think the biggest part for me, looking back, was there are so many different roles in the construction industry, some of which construction is the end result, but actually the process, if you're thinking on the IT side, so there are so many roles around that really construction is just an end product in the background that doesn't really get sold enough, so that the volume of roles that are available that could be offered to young people is massive. Sorry, what was your original question?
It's okay. How can we make it more attractive? For I say just for anybody wanting to join the construction industry, because I think you're right. You talk. I think there's a perception that construction is just that end product.
Yeah.
And it's a process. There's lots of different roles, but also, Steve, it's even that construction. Call it the end. Call it the construction phase, delivery on site. There's this perception, like you said, they're cold, dark, dank environments, but they're not. They're much improved. They're a lot safer than they were. But how? Let's change the question. How can we make the construction management role more attractive?
Construction management. I mean, the whole industry is going high tech, for want of a better description. But if you think of the options that are available to your modern day construction manager, but we've just invested in a collaborative piece of software that is not just about the collaboration, but the front end management tools of you can pull a drawing up for anything at any given time on a tablet at point of use. The hand filling forms at your desk is now 10 times easier. We've got 360 cameras rather than meticulously walking around trying to capture every progress photo that you need, and it's always the one that you haven't got that you do need. We use drone technology for countless things. I don't know. I'm almost like, don't get me wrong. I'm done on, site every day in my career. But if all of those things had been there when I first started off, I'd be in my element. Because it is a really, really good time to be coming into the industry. Technology is huge. I mean, AI is already playing a part. I know it's a big topical subject at the moment, but it's already playing a part. Behind the scenes. Only a matter of time before that reaches physical site level. I'm going back a few years now when augmented reality was first introduced on sites where you could put a QR code on the wall and a client or whoever could scan that, and they were panning around what their finished job was going to look like. And I'm going back a few years now when that first came out, so that's moved on hugely. I mean, it is a really attractive. Out away from site, you have flexible working these days. People are measured on what they do, not how many hours they're doing. That is the modern working culture. Construction is an attractive industry to come into, and that's reflected by. Going back again a long time, the number of women that are now in the industry, as opposed to some years back, is reflective of the fact that it's a hugely inclusive industry, and why would you not want to come into it?
Good answer, Steve. Yeah,
and coupled with and I've said this before, where there aren't many industries where you can change landscapes. That's the biggest part of it for me. Is that you drive. Well, there's the joke where builders are driving around all the time. I built that, or I was involved in that, or that is huge for me, particularly when they're sort of iconic buildings or landmark buildings in your area.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what does it for me. It's the contribution you can make, isn't it?
Absolutely.
To the environments in which we live.
And there don't need to be big jobs for that to be the case.
No, absolutely. And actually, what you just said there leads beyond to my sort of penultimate question. Really, is some really good stuff's come out of this discussion, and obviously you've got a lot of wealth and experience and knowledge. What sort of projects have you worked on that you're really proud of, or something that's really interesting that you like to impart on?
I mean, there's been a few. I mean, some simply because of in your hometown, where you've built something that you see every day, and it is literally a landscape changer. The horizon has now got something that you were involved in building on it. But I think for me personally, I spent a lot of time, about 3.5 years, I think, working in Southampton General Hospital. I wouldn't even like to think how many projects I was involved in up there. I've been in there recently with my mum, and you see what a great job is being done in there, and just to have been involved in improving that facility in some way, big, small. I mean, we've done big jobs in there over the years, and just down to small sort of little refurbishments. But it's a tough place to work from a construction perspective. Nowhere near as tough as it is for the people that the medical staff and all the rest of it. So to have been involved in improving that facility in any small way, large way, it is probably the most rewarding for me. As rewarding as building huge buildings that are fantastic, and you do get a sense of reward when you walk away from them, but it's not the same as delivering something that really matters. Going back to impact and contribution again, isn't it? Yeah. I know. We're doing lots of education work at the moment, not by design, but the last year has been a huge percentage of education work, and that's rewarding because you any job where you feel like you're giving back, I suppose, and construction gives you the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Last question, then, Steve. Is there anything I haven't covered in these questions in the sort of construction management environment you'd like to sort of add, or? I mean, you could go on forever. I mean, just we'll always need more people coming into it. I mean, I don't know what the numbers are these days, but when I was in college, we'd begin the year with sort of 30 people in the classroom and finish the year with like 8, for various different reasons. And, I don't know what the numbers are these days, but it doesn't feel, and I don't think it will ever feel like there's enough people coming into the industry. So yeah, if anybody's watching these industry videos and thinking, well, shall I, shan't I? Yes, do. Get in contact with me, yourself, just anybody, and find a route into the industry, because it's a brilliant place to be. Steve, thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So I really hope you found value in this video. If you have any questions on the topics we've covered, please do not hesitate to get in contact with us, and we really look forward to hearing from you.